Hello again, everyone. Continuing New Orleans week, I'm going to talk about the Pelicans today, who are on the verge of making the playoffs. And if they do, it'd be really cool because then all the teams in the Southwest Division would be in the playoffs, which just proves how dominant that division is in the whole NBA. The other teams in the division are the Mavericks, Rockets, Grizzlies, and Spurs. So if the Pelicans can find a way to make it into the playoffs, then all teams would be represented, and that just proves that the Southwest Division is, in my opinion, the best in the NBA. The Western Conference is superior to the Eastern Conference. And then you can break it down further and look at the divisions, and that's where I would say the Southwest Division is the best in the league. For sure, the most competitive. Teams like the Pelicans are having a 500, above 500 season kind of thing, and they could potentially miss the playoffs. You can flip it over to the Eastern Conference, like I've said in the past, the weaker of the conference by far, and there's going to be teams that have below 500 records by almost 10 games, and they're going to make the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, but the Pelicans could potentially miss the playoffs with a solid plus 500 record this season. So hopefully they can make it into the playoffs and can make a deep run in the playoffs. They're going to have a hard first-round opponent if they do squeak into the 8th seed, facing the number 1 seed, whoever that may end up being, whether it's the Grizzlies, whether it's the Rockets, whether it's the Warriors, regardless, even if who the number 1 seed is, 1 to 8, they're all going to be competitive teams, and I think whoever does represent the Western Conference in the finals of the NBA season will win it, purely because I don't think the East has strong enough talent, strong enough competition. Whoever gets to the Eastern Conference final and represents the East is going to have an easy road to get to the finals. The only team in the East that I could see potentially beating any of the top 8 teams in the West would be the Cavaliers, just because they got LeBron James, they got Kevin Love, they got star players there as well with Tristan Thompson, Kyrie Irving, the list goes on, that they could be the only team, in my opinion, in the East that could dethrone a Western Conference team. The Raptors have been having a good end of the season. I just don't think they got the depth that other teams do to win a championship yet. Being a Canadian, obviously I do like the Raptors, so it'd be nice to see them do something. But today it's all about the Pelicans. Hopefully they can squeak in with the 8th seed. Looking at the Pelicans roster, they did acquire some assets at the trade deadline kind of thing in Norris Cole and Pondexter. Good players, good veteran players. When you look at Cole this season, 10.2 points per game with 1.8 rebounds and 3.5 assists. And then Pondexter has 9.3 points per game, 3 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. So those are good players to have in your lineup, especially if you want to make a deep playoff push. Those are good guys to have coming off the bench or in your starting rotation, that are going to chip in 10 points a game, give you the few boards, get you the few assists that you need to find those open man and get those second chance opportunities, especially in a tough playoff opponent, that whoever it may be that you're going to have. It's important to get those second chance opportunities. It's important to find that open man and get the easy baskets when you have the opportunity. With the Pondexter trade, they also did get a second round pick in this upcoming draft. So the Pelicans, like I said, might squeeze into the 8th seed. If not, they'll finish the 9th seed. So they're not going to get a top 10 pick in the draft. But getting draft picks is going to be important to find assets through the draft that can join this team, who is on an up-and-coming team that is going to continue to find success in the future. Obviously, Anthony Davis is the cornerstone of this roster. He was just drafted back in 2012, and this season he's averaging a double-double. He's averaging 24.5 points per game, 10.3 rebounds, as well as 2.1 assists. So he's a good guy to have as a cornerstone of your roster and a guy to build a championship team around. He's going to finish, in my opinion, he should finish at least in the top 5 of MVP voting. I don't think he's going to win the MVP, obviously. I think Westbrook and Stephen Curry, as well as James Harden, are all kind of going to be competing for that. I think Westbrook, having the 10-plus triple-double season that he's had, is kind of a favorite, in my opinion, to win the MVP, but they're all very deserving candidates of those 3 guys that I've mentioned. And Anthony Davis, a guy who has averaged 24.5 points per game as well as 10.3 assists, is going to get a top 5 MVP vote for sure, but won't win the MVP, and that just proves how solid players in the West can be and how great the talent is in the NBA. But Davis has still got a lot more years to grow. This is only his 2nd year in the league, 3rd year in the league, my apologies. So he's going to develop and grow, and hopefully in the next few seasons, whenever he does become a free agent, he doesn't jump ship and go and sign with a team that's a contending team, because I do think the Pelicans do have the opportunity to become a contender, and I think if Davis remains loyal and stays with the team for years after his free agency comes available, they can win championships up through the rest of this decade, up to the end of this decade, possibly to the 2020s. We'll see what happens. Obviously, one player can't win a championship, and bringing in players at the trade deadline are going to help you in a deep playoff push, but you have to have other guys that are going to contribute as well. Holiday obviously has had an injury-plagued season, but he chips in with 15.2 points per game, 3.5 boards, and 7.1 assists, so it's important to have guys like him. Gordon, another guy, 13.3 points per game, 2.6 boards, 3.9 assists. Evans, a very important part of their roster, 16.7 points per game, 5.3 boards, 6.6 assists. So between Holiday and Evans, you got two guys who are averaging more than 6.5 assists per game. So if you get two players that combined can get almost 15 assists per game between just the two of them, that's important. That means you're finding the open man. You got good team chemistry because you're finding the open man, and you're making plays and you're making points and baskets to win games. So that's important to have those guys in your team. Other guys, Asic, obviously, he's more of your rebounding guy, good guy to have down low. He's not going to chip in a ton of points, just 7.3 points per game this year, but he is averaging 9.9 boards per game. So that's solid. If you can have two guys on your roster that almost average double-digit boards per game, that's important. That means you got some good talent down low and guys that are going to grab those boards and get you second chance opportunities on the offensive side of the court, and also stop your opponents on the defensive side of the court from them getting second chance opportunities. It gets you would have more ball control, more ball possession, and that's important for wins to happen. Anderson, another important guy, 14.4 points per game with 5.1 boards and 1 assist. And then Anjika is 6.8 points per game with 4.8 rebounds and 0.7 assists. So they have a solid roster. They got a lot of talented guys. And I do think if they find a way to get to the 8th seed, they're going to put the number 1 seed in a tough position, and it's going to be a very competitive series. So good luck to the Pelicans as they finish off this season. Good luck as you go into the future. I think Anthony Davis is going to be the cornerstone and a great guy to build a future championship roster around. And acquiring Norris Cole and Pondexter, especially Cole, if you do make the playoffs, he's a great guy to acquire at the trade deadline because he's got a lot of playoff experience, obviously playing for the Miami Heat for many years. He's got playoff experience, which is important to have when you have a young roster, especially when your star is Anthony Davis, who doesn't have a lot of playoff experience, if any playoff experience. So you're going to want to have veterans on your roster that can help him continue to produce like he has in the regular season into the playoffs, because the playoffs is a completely different atmosphere, and veterans know that. Young players don't necessarily know that until they get there. So hopefully they do get there, and Anthony Davis can prove that he can be a star in the playoffs as well, because that's, I think, where stars and guys who have great reputations and great stats and great legacies in the league are how they produce in the playoffs, how they, championships that they win, how they produce, how they get to those championships are important. I'm sure any player in the league would tell you that they would give up MVPs and Rookie of the Years and all those individual accomplishments to get a championship. I know if I was Steve Nash, that's the one thing he said when he retired was his biggest regret is never winning a championship. So hopefully these guys have an opportunity to compete for a championship in the near future, and then they can put that on something that they've been able to accomplish is getting to a championship. And then if Anthony Davis goes and wins MVPs and all that kind of stuff, fantastic. But I think getting to an NBA Finals and winning a championship is the ultimate goal of any NBA team. So good luck to the Pelicans as they finish off this season. Hopefully they get a little run into the playoffs. Thank you all for watching this week as I talked about the Saints and the Pelicans. Next week I'm going to be talking about the Cleveland teams. So I'll be talking about the Cavaliers, the Browns, as well as the Indians. Thank you again all for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at GHAM614, and I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.